All right, everybody. Thanks for being patient. Welcome to Talking Ball Postgame Live with Pat Leonard here from Northwest Stadium. Giants, Commanders, what more is there to say? Where do we begin? 21-6, an incredible disappointment, but I can't say I'm surprised. I picked a team to go 3-14, despite a lot of the optimism that we saw during the summer. There was a lot of reason to believe that there were certain elements of this roster that could show some improvement, but the bottom line is the key pieces, the key problems, the issues that they had to address in order to be a good football team and to be able to beat the likes of the Washington Commanders, the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe even a team like the Dallas Cowboys, who's beaten them 15 of the last 16 and 8 straight. The fact of the matter is, everybody, the first string offense did not show a lot of promise in the offseason and in the summer. And I'm talking about practice and games. And the defense, despite adding talent, as you saw, Abdul Carter's talent is very real. However, their run defense still not a strong part of what this team can bring. Their interior defensive line still not good enough there. Jaden Daniels, every time Dexter Lawrence was out of the game to start some of those drives in the first half, Daniels was carving them up down the field. A lot of drop zone coverage, a lot of windows that Washington was picking on. I told you guys all summer that Dexter Lawrence did not look like he was in 100% pure dominant Dexter Lawrence football shape due to the fact that he was coming back from this dislocated elbow and really brought along slowly. And I think that's what we saw here. You know, he ended up playing a fair amount of the game when all was said and done. But there were early on in this game, they were giving him plays off, nearly full drives off. They were doing a lot of like starting other defensive tackles early on the drives and then bringing Dexter in more high leverage situations when the Commanders got within striking distance, let's say on the Giants half of the field or inside the Giants 40. The exact participation, I have the next gen stats here. The snap percentages. Let's see. Dexter Lawrence played 46 snaps, so that was 70.8%. So typically you would want to see him playing more than that, but also, you know, just the impact. Obviously, when he's not on the field, even if he's not at his best, he's still commanding double teams. Like that's what we saw today. Even when he was not completely dominant up front, and certainly we did not see the dominant Dexter Lawrence we're used to. But even if he's not dominating, just being in the game, if he can be a semblance of himself, he can command a double team and earn a one-on-one for somebody else. But that I thought was a big story of this game defensively. The defense still held its own. Certainly, like as Brian Burns pointed out, you know, there was the end of, well, first of all, there was the end of half play by Abdul Carter, which was really exciting. He tackles Jaden Daniels to prevent a first down and maybe even a touchdown. And then from there, that leads to the Commanders not getting any points at the end of the half and giving the ball to the Giants to start the second half. So where does this leave us? This leaves us at the main story. It's always the main story with the Giants. It's always the main story with Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. They don't have the offense fixed. They don't have the quarterback right. The offensive line doesn't look very good. Russell Wilson looks, you know, remember at the end of Eli Manning's career when he was hanging on, but he just didn't have the same skill set that he used to. That's how Russell Wilson looks now. Russell Wilson looks like a shell of his former self. And certainly if their offensive line isn't good enough, or it looks like the way it did against the Commanders, Russell Wilson is not the quarterback who is going to overcome those issues and those problems. He does not have what it takes to put this team on its back and to resolve all of that for them. He's not the salve. He's not the solution. And this is why all the while I continue to stress that I thought this should have been a quarterback competition. Dorrance Armstrong for Washington had 9 quarterback pressures. Dedrick Wise had 4. Deron Payne had 3. Jacob Martin had 3. This is all courtesy of NFL Next Gen Stats. 2 sacks for them, 1 sack for the Giants, split between Abdul Carter and Kayvon Thibodeau. We'll talk about all of that and more. But I think the headline of all this, as I get to your questions, thank you for being here. I'm the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. You can see I'm here in the stadium at Northwest Stadium, ready to jump back on the Amtrak train in about an hour and a half or 2 hours and get back up to northern New Jersey. Looking forward to the Leonard Marshall charity golf outing If you guys didn't check it out, go check out my interview with Leonard Marshall on the YouTube channel, PL on NFL, and please go and support those causes. LeonardMarshall.com. You can support him there, support his causes there, Tunnel to Towers, Bag the Violence. Good causes for Leonard there as we roll into week 2. But week 2, there's a lot of decisions to make. Brian Daboll already being asked, and he even said at one point, kind of under his breath, like, this is going to be an every week thing. But here's what happens when you have a quarterback like Jaxson Dart that you believe in as strongly as the Giants do, who had the kind of preseason that he did, and when Russell Wilson looks the way he did in this game, why would you not consider a quarterback change? Now, I want to be clear and fair about what was discussed and what happened after the game as we asked Brian Daboll these questions. So Brian Daboll was asked, I asked, and others asked about Jaxson Dart. First, he said he did not consider putting Jaxson Dart in this game at all. Despite having the package, obviously you saw, even though they didn't let us talk to the quarterbacks during the week in the locker room, the Giants were happy to leak to the national media that they had a package for Jaxson Dart, which is something I told you guys all, during the summer, and I put in the New York Daily News on August 20th. You can find the link there at nydailynews.com. But he said, despite that, he didn't consider putting him in the game. Daboll said that this was a situation where Russ was the guy, and they just made sure they had backup quarterbacks like Jaxson Dart ready for plays that they're comfortable with. Now, he would not directly, this is the interesting part, this is the headline really of the postgame. Daboll would not directly answer a question about whether he was considering replacing Wilson with Dart as the starter week 2 at Dallas. His first answer was, when I asked him, he said, we're just here after the game, which is not an answer. And eventually I said to him, Brian, in fairness, like, this is essentially 2 different times during the presser he had avoided answering that question. And I said, if you don't give an answer, people are going to interpret it as you're not willing to answer it, and therefore the door is open. And he said, I have confidence in Russell Wilson. He said, to be clear, this game isn't on Russell Wilson. It's not on Russell Wilson. I want to make that clear. But come on, guys. 17 of 37, 168 yards, 8 carries for 44 yards, a fumble that he recovered himself in the red zone. Giants are 6-11 in 2023, 3-14 last season. Now they are 0-1 here. We also had Brian Daboll and Malik Neighbors dust up on the sideline in the first half. Neighbors said, I said I was going to speak up when it was time for me to speak up. I was just trying to get guys going, trying to get everything going. I felt like we was lacking out there. The energy wasn't right. So I took it upon myself to try to boost people up. It's 2 competitive people going at it. He wants to win. I want to win. So, a lot to talk about here, a lot of frustration, I'm sure, from the fan base, a lot to discuss. We are brought to you here by MyBookie, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, Boom, Chaga Mushroom, Super Drink, and Sal Loretta for Men. Go check out our arrivals, on Instagram, YouTube Shorts everywhere, and the Giants arrivals. Some great looks, some great fits. We had Kayvon Thibodeau in a Hellman-sponsored mayonnaise outfit. We had me rocking the Sal Loretta Icy Blue. Already took it off because it's a little warm, it gets a little warm early NFL season. And I'm going casual for this one. So pardon my look. Joey B was here with us in Washington, and he checks in with the first super chat. This is setting a great example as always. Joey B, thank you so much. If you purchase a super chat or super sticker, you will be elevated to the top of the queue. So your comment or question gets addressed first, or it goes right up to next in the queue, just so you know. That's a great way to support us. Obviously, that and the best way to support us is also supporting our sponsors. We'll tell you about them a little bit more in a second. But first, want to get to Joey B's commentary here. He says, it was sad to sit in the front row to watch this performance. We are a 3-win team. Preseason was fun, but we played 2s and 3s. How is Micah doing? Should we be worried? I know that the X-rays came back negative, according to Mike Garafolo from NFL Network. Mike got to that one first and is very plugged in with the Giants in the NFL, but also the Giants particularly. So that's good news. Now, anybody who's an athlete at any level, sometimes if you don't break something, obviously it's great to hear that, but then a really bad sprain to certain ligaments or tendons or areas or whatever, or obviously potential tears, that's still on the table. And those types of things have to be ruled out as well. So typically what happens here, guys, is that when a guy gets hurt like Micah did today, they do the X-rays immediately, as they did today, and then they get scheduled for an MRI the following morning. So my expectation would be that Micah McFadden will undergo an MRI tomorrow. That's just standard operating procedure. I'm not reporting that. I'm just saying like that's what always happens in these cases. Guy goes home, goes into the, hospital special surgery or, to the doctor, Giants doctors. And on Monday morning, they do MRIs and they try to confirm that there's no other damage to any of those ligaments or tendons or whatever like that. His lower leg and foot and ankle area on his right leg is what was air casted when they took him off the field there. So we hope for the best. Mike is a great guy, also had a great preseason, and they really need him there. You saw Cliff Kingsbury attack Darius Muasau immediately in pass coverage, going to Zach Ertz for that touchdown, early on to take the 7-0 lead. And McFadden, just an all-around better player. And like I said, really brings the energy, had a hard hit, I believe, on the opening kickoff of the game. And you remember he set the tone in the preseason against the Bills as well. So, really good player. Hope for the best for him. I would say, generally we end up talking to Brian Daboll on Monday, and usually the answer is, oh yeah, he's undergoing some MRI or he's getting some work done. We don't have anything yet. And then by the end of the day, Monday, one of us runs it down or it gets leaked nationally, as is known to happen from the Giants. And, we all find out together. So hopefully Micah's okay. Given how serious it looked in the moment, typically this is the type of thing that will cause a guy to miss time regardless of what the final result of all the tests is. So I would not expect him back on the field in Dallas, right? Or necessarily in the next week or 2 or 3 ahead, based on what usually happens in these situations. The things with like a guy like Tyrone Tracy last year in camp, or Justin Fields this year, where it looks catastrophic and then it's absolutely nothing for the most part. Those are few and far between, but hopefully that's the case here for Micah because, they need him for sure. All right. So thank you so much for setting the example there, Joey B. Sorry you had to witness that so up close. Sorry you had to pay for those tickets and watch that. The Giants stats are just incredible. 89 to 12. They've lost their last 3 season openers by a combined score of 89 to 12. Really difficult to believe. This statistic that Ed Werder tweeted from ESPN Research is absolutely astounding. So the Giants are the 3rd team in NFL history and the first in 83 years to have 6 or fewer points in season openers in 3 straight seasons. So the only other 2 ever were the 1940-42 Lions and the 1922-25 Bears. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely embarrassing. Let's just say it for what it is. 2 things I want to say, get off my chest. Then we'll tell you our sponsors real quick, then we'll get into your questions. I know this is only 0-1. First of all, anybody who walks around calling Brian Daboll an offensive genius is not watching these games, okay? I know Kafka's calling the plays, this and that, but he's the head coach. Yes, the Josh Allen stuff worked out. Outside of that, what are we watching? You're going to blame it on Daniel Jones. You're going to blame it on Tyrod Taylor. You're going to blame it on Drew Lock. You're going to blame it on Russell Wilson. You're going to blame, is Jaxson Dart next? You want to put the kid in, but you don't want him to be party to this disaster. Look at what Daniel Jones did today. Now, I know he played a Miami team in disrepair, in the, I think it was a 33-8 win that the Colts had there over the Dolphins, and Mike McDaniel definitely on the short list of coaches who might, could to be first fired. But Daniel Jones with 298 total yards and 3 touchdowns and no turnovers, leading the Colts to a 33-8 win over the Dolphins. So, hey, maybe Daniel Jones can thrive a little bit better with a better play caller and a better team around him. And maybe it's the Giants. Maybe it's not the quarterback who is just the reason for everything. Like, I know we're already going to have discussions about, it's not just the quarterback. It's not just the quarterback, or it is the quarterback. Listen, the bottom line is this. The Giants' infrastructure isn't there, and that goes all the way up to Joe Shane. I've already talked with some people after this game who have reiterated the type of job security conversations that I've told you about and that we've had in the past. And that is that while Brian Daboll is absolutely, on the hot seat, and, you have people watching this game in the league texting me saying like, he's not going to make it. He's cooked if this is really the product they're putting on the field this season. But even some of those people are like, I think Joe Shane will probably be safe. And obviously he's created some ties and relationships at the highest levels of the organization that seemingly could protect him. But look at what we are putting on the field here for the Giants. I mean, they're scratching their number 7 overall pick, Evan Neal, as a healthy scratch. They scratched their 3rd round pick out of Toledo, Darius Alexander. This was a guy you guys wanted to hear a lot about, wanted to be excited about, and I kept telling you all summer that I didn't see it, and I wasn't seeing enough. So he was a healthy scratch. They can't stop the run. This is a guy that the front office and the Giants drafted specifically to address the fact that they can't stop the run, and he couldn't get on the field in week 1. So, the fact, the idea that it's just on the coach either is absolutely absurd. Now, I thought Shane Bowen's defense did everything it could today. I thought they, listen, there were windows open down the field, some of that drop coverage and stuff. Washington knew how to pick it apart. Jaden Daniels is one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. And when the pass rush got there, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, some of these guys really showing their stuff at times. But there were some key downs, key parts of the game where like the big bad pass rush just wasn't getting there. Jaden Daniels on one key 3rd down had 4 full seconds to throw to Deebo Samuel, 13 to 15 yards down the field on a I think it was like a 3rd and 11 or something like that. You just can't have that. And, one interesting thing that developed, and I'll get into your questions after sponsor reads next. One interesting thing that we saw is, now I mentioned Dexter Lawrence and, trying to get back to full game shape and that kind of stuff, but they were rotating their defensive line like a hockey line at times, like that, early on in the game, in the first drive where they were getting driven down the field on with Dex out. Once the Commanders got to the Giants 30 or so, they took out their entire defensive line, all 4 guys, and put in a new 4. I think the new 4 they ended up putting in was like Golston, Lawrence, Roy Robertson, Harris, and Thibodeau, and Carter going in for Burns, Thibodeau, Davidson, and Nacho. So like you usually don't see that. You usually see like a 1 guy in, 1 guy out, or 2 guys in, 2 guys out. So that was an interesting element of it. There were times today where it worked and it functioned and it helped. And, definitely for the long haul, you hope that it's going to help keep these guys fresh, particularly the veterans like a Brian Burns. But, it's in the end, they didn't get enough results. Mark Sullivan checks in with a super chat, says, Pat, what's your win-loss prediction for 2025? I'm 4-13. I'm at 3-14. My only hope for it being higher than that, Mark, is Jaxson Dart coming in and fixing things. But I'm sure we'll get into a conversation with everybody about this and a debate and a healthy conversation. But, one thing that stands out is it's the catch-22. It's like, okay, could Jaxson Dart clearly and obviously help something and improve something with this offense? You have to imagine the answer is yes, with how Russell Wilson looks, right? But can you subject Dart to the type of beating he might take if he's playing behind a line that can't protect him? Of course, Andrew Thomas not being able to play in this game is a big factor, but you can't just keep blaming your team and your roster and your inability to function on the absence of one player. Like, you just can't do it. You either, if that player can't stay healthy, then you got to resolve the situation elsewhere. You got to go sign somebody else. You got to draft somebody else at the position. And they're not the only team that deals with injuries up front. Some teams compensate for it, and some teams can't. As I said, Russell Wilson was under duress. He held the ball a lot, even when he had time. Got to get the ball out. I think there were some pressures that happened because he had the ball in his hand too long. So, bottom line is, this was a pathetic performance on offense. The defense did its best, I thought. Of course, yes, things to clean up, opportunities that occurred. I don't think that, this is I think you could see, because they can't stop the run consistently, especially, this is not like the great big bad Giants defense that people were hoping for. Now, could it grow into that? I think if Dexter Lawrence is full strength, completely healthy, and Abdul Carter is this player that we see, then you could start seeing an uptick and, turnovers forced, that kind of stuff. And then maybe it really does turn into what you're looking for, but they don't have time to waste. They got to get there now. So a lot of concerns, obviously, and Micah McFadden being hurt doesn't help. But we're grateful to our sponsors, MyBookie. I hope you guys tailed my picks this week. That not all of them hit, but I did give out Daniel Jones as my fantasy sleeper. So I'm very proud of that one. Remember, you can tail Pat's picks all season long, mybookie.ag. The code is Leonard. Get a 50% deposit bonus, and you can play the casino, bet WWE and UFC. It's really the best for both of those sports if you're into that, and obviously some great stuff for the NFL all season long. That is my bookie. They have a lot of interesting features too that other sports books don't have. You can have fun perusing it. Definitely look out for the money bag partner picks. They have tons of daily bet boosts. Always check it out. Make sure you're getting those bet boosts when you're placing a wager. Also, thank you to Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants, and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally feel a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today. Use the code on your screen, TalkingBall25, for that discount, that special discount today. This is a great product, honestly. I hand out samples sometimes to friends and family. I've done giveaways. We've had viewers who have purchased the product, and I was at the Super Bowl on Radio Row with people trying free samples there. Haven't had anybody say anything bad yet. Kayvon Thibodeau and Bobby Okereke even tried it and liked it. They said it gave them a little kick, and Kayvon thought it was going to taste terrible, and he admitted it did not taste bad. So Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. We're grateful to them. They have some cold teas now too. I really like the cold teas, different flavors: Sweet Dreams, Rise and Shine, Midday Boost. And of course, I got to talk about Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. So Jared is crushing with the content. Please go to his Instagram, especially at Hooks Rub. He's got lives going on YouTube at the State Fair in Utah, I believe, rocking a brisket demo. And great flavor, great Instagram post by Jared as well, who owns and operates Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. Diehard Giants fan, originally from Houston, brings that big Texas barbecue flavor. But he welcomed everybody to the season today. Dropped that code on the reel. It is Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. It's hooksrub.com. You're going to go there, use the code TalkinBall for 15% off. Great product, great rubs, great spices, great swag as well. But seriously, if you're a flat top burger person, if you're at the tailgate at the stadium in Dallas and Arlington next week, or for the Kansas City game in week 3, and you're putting, you're making some, spicy, cheesy nachos, some wings, whatever it is, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices is getting you there. Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, join the flavor family. Go to hooksrub.com, and it's at Hooks Rub, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. We smoke meat. Stay tuned. Might have another giveaway today. Giants giveaway, Giants trivia. All right, let's see. Oh, and we got a super chat right here. I believe this is Jared himself. Hooks, Rubs, and Spices says, gotta run. Pat and chat, have a great day. Safe travels, and on to week 2. You got it, Jared. Thank you so much. All right, Chris says, Daboll can't blame the quarterback anymore. Yeah, no doubt. Well said, Chris. Great way to get us started here. Let's see. Hunter says, thank God our $22 million dead cap quarterback balled out today. I know, great feeling. H-Town says, I'm glad Quadzilla went and won a Super Bowl as the best player in the league and embarrassed the Giants and the organization. And I'm glad Jones won with almost 300 passing yards or 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Crazy. Iconic says, Pat, what was the excuse today for the lack of offense? How close were they to putting in Dart? I was watching Dart on the sideline consistently. I was watching the Giants. I was watching Daboll here live, and I had my binoculars here. So at a stadium like this with like poor sight lines, and as a reporter too, there's 3 things you have to be watching. No, 4 things you have to be watching at minimum. There is the field, there's the sideline, there's the television feed, because it's on delay, right? So it always functions for you as like a replay, and then you see the replay on the TV feed. And then obviously there's, social media, which is 4th on that rung in that priority order for sure. But those are the things I'm always watching when I'm covering a game. And so one thing I always do try to do, and I think that I do, very well, I think, is to monitor kind of the goings on, the interactions on the sidelines between people, or maybe like some things that tip a hand on what's coming, what the pecking order is going to be, if somebody's frustrated. Now, sometimes the TV feed also picks it up before you do. So I didn't see Neighbors and Daboll getting into it on the sideline myself, but Fox highlighted that on the broadcast. So what was the excuse? So that's to answer the Dart question of how close were they to putting him in. There was definitely, they have enough excitement about him, Iconic, where Daboll has prepared him all the way up to, like, Jaxson, if we need you, I'm coming to you, like that type of thing. I mean, they are that close as far as feeling he's ready to go, believing in what he can do when he enters the game. But I've said this all along. Number one, I told you guys they were going to have a package. It really is just disgusting how they've handled this with feeding stuff to the national media while trying to block people who actually spend their hard time and dedicate their professional lives to covering this as fairly as we can. But working on that situation with Jaxson Dart, this was a situation where that package, that idea that he was ready to go in and that they had a certain scheme and certain plays that they were going to run with him and they believed he could execute. That's a very real thing. They were sensitive, though, certainly, and that was part of the preventing us from talking to the backup quarterbacks during the week, obviously, and neither talked after the game as well. There was a lot of conversation about that in the locker room off the record. But the bottom line is Dart is as close to playing as a person in his situation could be. It's just a matter of, will Daboll pull the trigger before the season gets out of hand? Because if he doesn't, then Dart has to completely turn things around in order to save him. If he does go to Jaxson Dart and he pulls the ripcord too early and misses, then that could backfire as well. But you asked the question, what was the excuse today for the lack of offense? So yeah, let's just go over what you're talking about too. So we have Washington outgained the Giants 432 to 231. The Giants had 74 rushing yards, 157 passing yards. 74 of their net rushing yards, though, were 44 of them were Russell Wilson, essentially escaping pressure with his legs, maybe one of them being a design run. And so Tracy went 10 carries for 24 yards, Devin Singletary 3 carries for 9 yards, and Cam Scatterbo 2 carries for -3 yards. So you got those 3 running backs right there. That's 15 carries for 30 yards. So that's 2 yards per carry by the running backs. And that's an easy place to start for sure. Conversely, Krosky Merritt, Bill, fantasy stud, Bill Krosky Merritt, 10 carries, 82 yards, and a touchdown. Jaden Daniels, obviously, 68 yards on 11 carries. Eckler, 6 for 26. McNichols, 4 for 25. They were also big parts of the passing game. Like the Giants got 4 catches for 23 yards from Scatterbo and Tracy combined. But you look over there, Eckler, 3 for 31. And really just, Debo. It's funny. Debo's kind of like a running back / receiver. I mean, the guy dropped like 2 or 3 passes. I mean, really, Washington was on the verge. If they hadn't dropped so many passes and committed so many penalties, they had 12 penalties in this game. This game could have been 40-6 if Washington wasn't stubbing its foot all the time. It really was closer to being that than people realize, I think. My take, though, Iconic, I'm rambling a little bit. A lot of energy, coming out of me right now. In first game day, a lot happening here. Oh, look at these guys, complete legends. Appreciate you, gentlemen. So when we look at what was the excuse for the lack of offense, I would say from the get-go, it looked like Mike Kafka's play calling was designed to protect an offensive line that the Giants expected to be overwhelmed. And I think they expected it to be overwhelmed in part because of Andrew Thomas's absence. Now, of course, I think across the board also the line is not very good. So that's what I think. I think if we looked at last year, you could have called them slightly below average at times. You could have called them below average at times. I think they're still in that same category, right? They ran it back on the offensive line. Some of their proposed solutions didn't work. James Hudson, who they signed to play in Andrew Thomas's place, is not a solution at that spot, right? It's just a stopgap. But if you force him into a starting role like this in games that you have to win, You're going to have to live with what transpires. And I thought that their anticipation of what the line was going to have to deal with, how they were going to struggle, led to play calling early that they were trying to get out on some bubble screens, quick completions. Wan'Dale Robinson had some success with that, but in the end, it's really hard to live like that. I mean, it's difficult to live on those dink and dunk plays and forcing your skill players to constantly, break tackles and juke 2 or 3 defenders just to get a first down every time. Like, it becomes a hard way to live as an offense. That was the start of it. And then I thought that combined with inability to run the ball. And then finally it was like, okay, well, now we've tried to set this up. And now remember, on the one drive where on the first time that they were 0 for 2 in the red zone, right? They 3 points out of 2 red zone trips. The first time they got to the red zone, that drive, they succeeded in getting Wan'Dale out on like a screen to the left side where he broke a tackle and gained 20 yards. And then they came over top with a deep shot to Neighbors for his first completion. It was like a 25-yard completion. But essentially, it was exactly what I told you guys this is going to look like, with Kafka kind of screening the deep passing game open, trying to draw the defense down, draw them across horizontally, and then get it down the field to number 1, Malik. So you saw it be effective there in one flash. But by and large, once they opened it up, I mean, you see 17-37. I thought there were plays where the line did not protect him well enough, and he was under duress frequently. I also thought once he was under that duress, Wilson started hesitating, he started pumping. He had a lot of like hesitation things where he was stuttering his feet a bunch. Honestly, I thought all the way around offensively, it was just not good enough. But the quarterback looks lost. He looks like he's not a playmaker, and I don't have any confidence in him as the long-term solution or even the short-term solution to what they're doing here. And I've been consistent in saying that. All right, we had a super chat come in. Sorry, I was getting very long-winded there, but like I said, a lot to say. Scott Harris, thank you so much, Scott, for being here, for checking in from Canada. He says, was Russell not seeing the field well where guys getting open can't put Dart in until O-line is better? Feels like our game planning coaching is the issue. Well, I do think they were game planning around the O-line in some cases there, Scott. So what would your solution be to that? I would ask you. And also, if you say you can't put Dart in until the O-line is better, the only thing that you're getting better is you're getting Thomas back. Now, that's not nothing. Once you get Thomas back, obviously that's key. First of all, I don't think you can count on it being Andrew like just pops back in week 2 and he's ready to go. I know the plan is for that to hopefully happen potentially if this week goes well in practice, but every practice he does a little bit more is the first time he's doing that. We don't know how this is going to go with him. So you can't, first of all, count on that happening soon or quickly. And then secondly, if you just change one thing about the offensive front like that, is that enough? So I guess my question to you would be, are you saying don't put Dart in until next season? Is that what you're saying? Maybe that is what you're saying. Now, you asked me about, was Russ not seeing the field well, were guys getting open? There were a handful of there was one play. So obviously they completed some kind of down the field to Malik. There were others where they took shots, and the Washington corners did a really good job at the point of attack, knocking the ball out. There was one in particular in the first half, I think it was, coming towards us in the stadium, where Neighbors was one-on-one with Marshawn Lattimore, and Lattimore ended up breaking it up. No safety help or anything. And if you watch that play, Neighbors' release on that play, like he really didn't release at all. You're used to seeing him being like sudden, coming off the line of scrimmage, and he kind of just like waited, stuttered a little bit, made like a shimmy shake, and then ran up the left sideline and tried to win a 50-50 ball. It just didn't look like the same explosive Malik. Now, this is something I should have mentioned at the top too. I asked him if he was 100% with his back, and he said, I won't be answering that question. So take that for what you will, for what it is. I don't know. To me, in my experience, that's giving a player an opportunity to say, I'm fine or I'm good. And usually Malik and people do that, or they say, yeah, I'm battling some stuff, but it's no excuse. So for him to say, like, I'm not answering that was interesting. I think that's something to monitor with him because, as we know, he's had the back, he had the toe earlier in the year. He did have He had the situation on Friday where he was suddenly a non-participant in practice. So I guess at the very least, coming out of this game with him giving us that answer, I think you probably have to expect that he's going to be, dialed back in practice again this week at some point. And maybe like last year, eventually it just becomes a regular thing. PM, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. PM says, if we start, oh, look at you again, PM checking in. If we start 0-3, do you think Daboll makes it to week 4? Could we potentially add Gruden or a free agent coach mid-season? Good question, PM. I know last year when I asked Daboll after the second game when they fell to 0-2 here, it was the same stadium, and I asked him if he was, concerned about his job. That was because I knew that if they had slid to like an 0-4, 0-5 start, that him getting fired right then and there was on the table. So at this point, no one has told me that at this juncture about this version of the Giants today, this year. I think it's different right now because he has Jaxson Dart, a rookie new quarterback in the building. You want to see that through. He was the main impetus behind pivoting from Shador to Dart as an organization, Brian Daboll was. So in that sense, I think like it's a different situation than last year when it was, backs against the wall, him standing up and taking ownership of Daniel Jones at first, at least, not being able to get it done. And then eventually, obviously, it all gets pinned on Daniel, obviously. But, the Giants riding them out through a 3-14 season. If you're going to ride it out through 3-14, you're probably not pulling the plug at 0-3. On the guy that you just pushed through 3-14. But again, remember this. I always say this, but remember this. Early this offseason, there was a lot of friction and not a lot of love on the collaboration side of the Daboll-Shane relationship. And, there was some accountability or lack of thereof coming out of last season. And, the collaborative approach of the head coach and the general manager took a turn for an every man for themselves more type of situation. Now, this offseason, they obviously did like a staged, public relations back and forth at one of their press conferences saying, hey, yeah, we've hit some rocky patches, but now we're through them and all that kind of stuff. But just keep an eye on all of that because like you said, the rats start scrambling on the ship when it starts to leak and starts to sink. All right, let's see. All right, let's keep going through the chat. Dr. Garrett says another season of misery. This is getting old. H-Town says Joe Flacco threw for 290 yards. Did you hear that? From a 40-year-old, coaching's issues is everything, and Mara loves the incompetent ones. Daboll, Judge, Garrett, Schumer, so on and so on. Well, you're throwing in Garrett, Judge, and Shermer with Brian Daboll, and Brian Daboll just said Brian Daboll just accomplished something that no other NFL team had done in the last 83 years. So, the offense we saw in the field today, I think, was a lot worse than what we saw Garrett, Judge, and Shermer put on the field, if you want to be honest. Milan, great to see you. Let's keep going here. H-Town, you're the man. I'm just going to make sure everybody gets a word in here, too, but I love your enthusiasm. Alex says this is the GM's 4th year and he hasn't fixed the O-line. Fire him. John says if the Giants lose the next 3 games, Daboll needs to be fired. Elevate Kafka, see what we have there. I don't hate that at some point as a solution and certainly an opportunity for Kafka, who has taken a beating here internally going back to when he first got here from Daboll and had been marginalized in the organization early. So I would like to see him get a crack for sure if it comes to that. Glenn says Giants are terrible. Long season ahead. Hunter says the second Daboll feels that seat get hot is when we see Dart, not until. To tell you the truth, he sounded completely defeated after this game. Not much emotion. Probably trying to control that emotion, given how he has, handled adversity and challenges and losing in the past. But all of that said, I think. He did sound defeated. He said this was actually a meaningful quote from Daboll about the loss and about, he was asked, how do you avoid thinking, here we go again. He says it does hurt. We had a good camp. Oh, it was about, good vibes in the preseason. How do you avoid saying, here we go again? He said it does hurt. We had a good camp, felt good coming into this game, and it does hurt. There's no question about that. So Kind of going out with a whimper there. Unfortunately, you hate hearing that. Let's see. Yes, can't build a competent O-line 4 years in. Hook says, remember being undefeated in the preseason. Hunter says, maybe next stream we can start with a mock draft of the top 3 because that's where we are going. John says, I remember in 73 when the Giants were 6-0 preseason, then lost 12 games when it counted. H-Town says, Knicks got rid of Tom Thibodeau after going to the playoffs and Eastern Conference Finals. Why can't Mara follow suit and clean house after continued incompetence? Well, the Giants like to blame it all on the media. Same story every year, Garrett says. This team can't compete at the line of scrimmage on either side of the ball. All right, let's see. Yeah, you guys are crushing it here in the chat. They are too busy on social media sites taking videos and pictures like swimsuit models instead of putting in work on the field day in and day out. Soft as Charmin, says H-Town. Wow. Fans are frustrated. I understand and I hear you. Let's see. So Hook's telling us here are the betting lines for the Giants-Cowboys game in week 2. Oh, thank you, Hooks. Really appreciate this. Money line, Cowboys are the favorite at -155, while the Giants are the underdog at +135. Over-under total points set at 44.5. Cowboys are beating us by 14, says H-Town. Let's see. All right, let's keep going. Murphy Johnson says, these losers can't beat the Commanders. Do you really think they're beating the Cowboys and the Eagles? Yeah, so the Eagles, no. The Cowboys, now the Cowboys defense, I think, is vulnerable. Certainly Parsons not there. DeMarvion Overshawn not in the lineup. But they have players. They showed attitude. They showed fight. They really should have beaten the Eagles in that first game. If we're being honest, they should have beaten the Eagles in that game. So, and then their offense, I mean, listen, who are the Giants scoring with on their schedule, right? Are they scoring with the Dallas Cowboys? Are they scoring with the Kansas City Chiefs? Are they scoring with the Los Angeles Chargers? This is what I've continued to come back to throughout the summer when we talk about win predictions. How are they going to fare? Is this going to translate to the regular season? It always, for me, came back to, yes, the defense has some more pieces. Yes, there might be some promise. There are some reasons to feel like it could maybe slightly turn on the defensive side of the ball. But this idea that we were going to see, like, you know, a complete turnaround on defense, a team that, you know, dominated so much on defense that the offense could just be okay and they could skate by and win close games and tight games. Like, that's not the NFL anymore. And also, if you're going to have that kind of defense, you need to be absolutely lights out. You cannot have a defense that has a couple good players on it and then everybody else, you know, is kind of half spectating. You know, you need to have a type of defense where the pass rush is so smothering and the run defense is so sturdy that you are dictating the offensive play calling and not the other way around. So the Giants have, you know, the defense did a lot of good things today, but to think that they were going to be some great team or some dramatically improved team just because of a slightly improved defense, it still always comes back to, can they score with their opponents? Because these teams are going to score points. You're going to play the Cowboys, and they're going to score in week 2 against the Giants 24 or 28 or 31 points. They just are. Like George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, an okay running game, an offensive line that showed fight against the Eagles, although they were without Jalen Carter last week. This Dallas Cowboys team is a high-flying, difficult attack to stop and to handle. And so, that, you know, there are no pushovers. They're going to be difficult to deal with. And the bottom line is, as well as the Giants defense plays in this game coming up in week 2, you're not going to win if your offense doesn't score 21, 24, 20, 27, 31 points for the Giants. It's just the modern NFL. And especially, you know, if you're not the Broncos or Texans or Eagles or, you know, one of these other teams whose defenses is so much more talented than other teams' offenses, then that's just how you have to be able to compete every week. Let's see. Why is fixing the offensive line rocket science to the Giants, says Simeon. Well, Simeon, sometimes it's as simple as poor evaluations. Other times it's scheme that you're putting guys in, you know, the wrong positions to succeed or fail. And then sometimes it's a combination of all of them. Like, I think largely for this regime, their draft picks on the offensive line have been, Evan Neal, strikeout, Josh Azudu, strikeout, Marcus McKeithen, strikeout, John Michael Schmitz, still need to see a lot of improvement, and Marcus Bowe, we'll see, right? So those are 5 draft picks on the O-line. Only one of those players is contributing as a starter, and he's not a high-level starter, right? So then you have the free agent signings, okay? And the rest of the offensive line outside of Andrew Thomas, who was selected by the previous regime, John Runyon, Greg Van Roten, Jermaine Illuminor, James Hudson. These are all guys this regime has patched together. I think Runyon is a solid player. And also, remember in the NFL, you can have a solid player like Runyon who, like, if you put him on a line around other players who are not as good, it can drag him down. Maybe he doesn't look the same, doesn't look as high quality. But if you put him on a good team, in between a great center and a great left tackle, might look different. You know what I mean? Van Roten, the idea here was for there to be, Evan Neal was able to compete with him for that job. Not only did Neal lose that job, but then he was inactive for this game with Aaron Stinney active as a backup guard. So then you have, a situation where poor drafting and signing free agents who are, mostly less than adequate puts you in that position, Simeon. I think the nastiness factor is something I've consistently said I want to see more of. You saw them come to Wan'Dale Robinson's defense today, but they just don't win at the point of attack in the run game. And obviously we're not able to hold up well enough. This was a Commanders defensive line that by and large, like, people were not coming into this game saying, oh man, how are you going to handle that Commanders pass rush, right? Everybody was talking about the Giants' big bad pass rush, and yet they make the Commanders look like the team that is an absolute wrecking crew and a force. And they just couldn't handle them. So, Simeon, I think it's poor. This is why I come back to, Brian Daboll and coaching is not the only issue, because, like I said, I think that the coaches were trying to find ways around that weakness, and particularly Thomas's absence and things like that. And I think the personnel shortcomings are the problem. And so that's why I think that's on the GM. Joey B checks in again. He says 2 guys who showed up today: Burns on the field, only guy with fire, and Jameis on the sidelines was pep talking all of his teammates. Joey B has the insight there on Jameis because he was right behind the Giants bench. Good to hear that. Jameis is good vibes. He would be a better quarterback than Wilson, I could tell you that. I've been saying that all along, and there's no doubt about it. What are we doing here? So, good insight there, Joey B. I agree. I thought coming into this game, I thought Brian Burns was going to be the giant difference maker. Like, if they made plays or they had a strong game or somebody stood out, I did think Brian Burns was going to lead the way. He was going up against a rookie tackle there and Connolly on the right side a lot. So I had some opportunities. Didn't have as big of a game as I expected, but he made enough of a difference. And like I said, this game is not about the defense. This game is about the offense. This team is about the offense. It always has been. It's about a general manager and coach who, despite planes flying over the stadium at the end of last season and the fans calling for change, ownership stuck with them, said it was okay, said, our patience is running out, but then stayed status quo. They draft a quarterback. There's a little bit more promise in the building because they have some young blood on the roster. But as we see on the field, no difference in the final result, no difference in the final product. It's just same old, right? Enough blaming Daniel Jones now. Time to find other scapegoats that aren't Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, I guess. That would be probably the Giants' way of operating at this point. Joey B, thank you. All right. Wyatt says, same garbage for 10 plus years, same clueless owners. Great job, Mara. No specifics on Micah McFadden other than the x-rays being negative, which is good, but then the MRI is what follows. So, you wait and see on the MRIs, but obviously promising, no broken bones. So then the next thing usually is a Monday MRI and results of that. And then you go from there. Key loss if he's down for sure. Milan thinks it's time to fire Brian Daboll. David says Daboll is a coordinator, not a head coach. And yeah, but he was only really a good coordinator with Josh Allen too, right? Like to say he's a coordinator, it's like a coordinator of what? A good offense? I mean, this is not a good offense. Now, granted, he wasn't calling the plays in this game, but we saw what happened last year when he was calling plays. John Mara asked him to give it up. Barry says a thorough Rogering today. We'll root for my team, but I can't waste my Sundays like this. Interesting. You know, we saw a lot of that from fans last year. Week 1 is very early for that to start. Wow. Barry, sorry to hear that, but I understand what you're saying, and that's just the same sentiment that we heard last year. Murphy said, if you want improvement, fire the coach. Dan says, hey, Pat, as I've said before many times, I'm not even a Giants fan, but your coverage of this team has made me invest in seeing where they end up going. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. And it's important for me to hear that from fans because, honestly, the amount of pushback and blowback I get at times from the Giants, from fans who don't want to hear the truth about the team, even if it's listen, I understand, like, you want to be entertained and also you want to win. You want your team to be good. And if they're not good, you don't necessarily want to hear about it too much about why they're not good. You have your own opinions. You see it on the field yourself. And then, like Barry, you just decide, you know what? I don't want to talk about any of this misery. I want to go do something that makes me smile and feel good. So I hear that for sure. And I do try to bring, positivity, levity, and also, optimism to what I feel deserves it, right? Like I told you guys in the preseason, a guy like Thomas Fedoni at tight end who was inactive today. I really like his range. I told you guys, I thought Marcus Bowe is a promising later round pick. Looks, you saw him get into the game today a little bit in extra packages. So that's interesting. And I talked about the promise of Dart, of Carter, but I have questioned Scadaboo's being undersized, I seriously questioned Darius Alexander being somebody who was going to help them significantly. So that's where we are, is just trying to keep it real, Dan. And so I appreciate you saying that because that gets me through the rough days, for sure. Wyatt thinks they win 2 games at most. Jonathan, what's going on? Great to see you. How quickly do we see the planes flying over MetLife, says Todd. Yeah, only you guys can answer that. Only one of you guys can charter one. I'm not a pilot, but no, I think to your point, Todd, doesn't this feel a lot just like last season? Like, doesn't this just feel like last year just continued? I mean, it's what it feels like. So much talk, so much Instagram, and at the end, same old team, at least on offense. Hirsch, what's up? Daniel Hirsch says, how is there anything else to talk about besides Daniel Jones? What if he keeps winning? Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was near the top of my story with how bad Russell, for the Daily News. I did 3 stories for the Daily News. I did the main story really on how bad Russell was and the offense was in this game and how disappointing but same old Giants they were. And then a story on Abdul Carter flashing and looking promising at times. And then another story on them making Alexander and Neal both inactive because that is really something. But Daniel Jones right front and center at the top of my game story because he deserves to be. That you're right, Daniel. It's probably worth doubling back and writing like a full Daniel Jones headline tomorrow morning on Monday to really kind of trumpet what the difference is there. What's the difference? The difference is probably better line, better play caller, and a better team. Right. They have Lou Anarumo as a defensive coordinator now. And, they have Shane Steichen there who, despite his shortcomings so far as a head coach, he does know how to call plays and does know how to utilize mobile quarterbacks, right? Going back to his work with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia for sure. So I thought that was a fit that you could see coming from miles away, in Indianapolis with Daniel. And I'm happy for him. I hope it continues. What if he keeps winning? Daniel, I would say this. If he keeps winning, you guys all saw how bad it was last year for the Giants with Saquon Barkley, right? It'll be even worse this year if Daniel Jones has this kind of success consistently this year. Because, I mean, it'll be similar, right? But I mean, think about how much blame has been put on Daniel Jones for all the Giants' shortcomings, coming out of last season. I mean, the guy was playing scout team safety before in practice before he got released by the team middle of the year, right? So, yeah, I think Joe Shane has some protection at the highest levels of this organization, and the Giants have convinced themselves that like all this losing is somebody else's fault. But sooner or later, if Daniel Jones continues to do this kind of thing somewhere else, then that is the kind of thing that could put Joe under the microscope just as much as Daboll. Let's see. Why, when players leave the Giants, do they end up being good? Says Scorpio. Barkley, McKinney, Love, Engram, etc. Well, in some cases, they are. I think the consistent thing of the guys you just mentioned, outside of Engram, the consistent element of the guys you just mentioned, Scorpio, is that Barkley, McKinney, and Love all went to better teams. So they instantly joined better teams with better teammates around them who augmented their skills, gave them a better chance of succeeding, and also, better coaching staffs. So I don't think it was just, I don't think it's just like the player can't play here and suddenly plays better somewhere else. I think they're surrounded elsewhere by better infrastructure, better schemes, better plans, and, what the Giants have going right now is a lot of malaise, a lot of like all of this, positivity, optimism, vibes, aura, all that conversation about what the Giants are now and how different it is. None of that shit is different if you lose and score 6 points. That's the bottom line. And that's what all these players find out is that, listen, all of these guys also left in part, or a lot of the guys you mentioned left after their situations and they were not treated or handled the way they felt like they should have been treated or handled. So it's not just about winning or losing. It's also about how the Giants handle their business with this regime. All right, let's stay in the queue. Thank you so much, Scorpio, for that. And thank you, as I said, to Daniel. Really appreciate that, Daniel Hirsch. Appreciate you. All right, let's get back in the queue here. Let's see. Just trying to get back here. A lot of questions coming in. Yeah, sorry, I've been a little bit close to the mic today. I've been rolling, so I've been. It sounds good in my headphones. I hope it's not muffling it too much for you guys. Let's see. Yeah, same exact offensive line from last year. Offensive gurus don't score 6 points a game. Commanders whip that butt. Let's see what else we got. Bobby O, 7 tackles, 9 assists. There's no reason why anyone on the field should have that, but I forgot half the D-line was locked up or on the floor. That's right. I'm sure we'll talk to Andre Patterson this week. We'll hear all about how the second level didn't get it done on the defense from the D-line coach. Maybe he should start developing that third-round pick who was inactive today. Let's see. Sublight says Wilson looks cooked. Luann says Dart would have scored. Luann, I'm sorry that your predictions starting today didn't come to pass. Hopefully it turns around. Let's see. Chris says Dart won't be better. Sublight says you can't bring Dart into this yet. We will destroy him before he even starts. Yeah, that is the flip side of it. Solving says I was at the game. A few takeaways. Javon Holland looked lost. The O-line can't get any movement. Linebackers played badly, and Theo was a major disappointment. Theo Johnson's another player who I have always battled the hype on him and said I need to see more there before I kind of join the crowd on what that player is and what he can be. 2 drops today, not great. There was also an interesting play where I have to ask him about this. There was a completion to him where he got taken down because Russell Wilson threw the ball too high, and Theo Johnson had to jump and catch the pass. And by the time he landed, it was a quick jump, but it wasn't in stride. And so he had to jump and catch it. And then he got back down and got his legs taken out. So that was interesting because he came up from that catch and tackle, almost looking back at the line of scrimmage and saying something like, come on, man, like, need a better ball there so I can make a play. So that was interesting to see as well. You guys can go back and watch that on the tape. It was one of his few receptions out to the left sideline. You watch him on the game broadcast kind of look back at Wilson after the play. Salvin, great point about Javon Holland. I think specifically what I saw is when the Commanders were able to isolate him with Zach Ertz on him, or just get him in man-to-man single coverage. Like, I think he had one, maybe two holds defensively in pass coverage, and it was late to a lot. I do agree. I don't disagree with that. I think that's a really good point. Thank you for that. Yeah, the O-line did not get any movement. Into, what's up, Into? Great to see you. Says, coming in late, so not sure if something like this was asked yet. But is the coach a victim of the GM or vice versa? I know they both have major pimples, but I'm curious about this. I think that here's what I would say. I think that the general manager has missed enough on major personnel decisions for several years now, where it has undercut the coach's ability to have the kind of team on the field that he needs to, particularly as we just outlined into on the offensive line, with not drafting well there and then signing guys who are either average or below average. Even Illuminor today, like a guy who just, whether it's a penalty here, a hold there, whatever, like, he was not aligned properly on one play, was just lined up off sides or was lined up off the line of scrimmage too far. Granted, this crew was throwing a ton of flags. I mean, way too many flags on both sides of the ball, just crazy, mostly against the Commanders too. But I think into that at places like the offensive line, the general manager and the personnel department are not doing the coaching staff any favors. You could look at Darius Alexander being active as another example of that in another position on the defensive line. That said, I also think it's fair to say on the coaching side that we know what Brian Daboll is as a coach right now, and it is not what the public perception and what all of his friends in the national media say about him. He's not an offensive guru. This is not an operation that is well-oiled and humming on all cylinders and victim of some problem with this player at that position or this guy on that spot. And hey, yeah, if I had a better GM or better personnel, like, we would turn it around. Like that, nothing has been shown to us that Daboll would be a different coach with a different kind of team. The only Giants team that has succeeded under Brian Daboll and has succeeded in any recent year is the 2022 team, when Wink Martindale's defense was so effective with way worse personnel than what we're looking at on the field right now for the Giants, by the way. But because of their effectiveness, and he and Daboll were able to craft like game plans around how do we run our offense to complement the defense so our team complements each other and we can win games. Martindale, as the head coach of the defense, said, here's what I can do for you. And then Daboll and Kafka on their side said, here's what to make sure we use Daniel's skill set the right way and don't protect him, or we protect him from any weaknesses in his game. And we utilize Saquon, but we try strategic ways to get him out and explosive. That was a full team operation worked by the coaching staff. That's why they won awards. That's why they deserved credit for it. Like, that was with much worse personnel than what we saw here, than what we see now in 2025. Martindale and Daboll and Kafka got this team to the playoffs. Daboll has been, unprofessional at times, how he ran his staff, obviously, and has shown that since Martindale has left, he can't create those answers himself on his own. I thought Bowen did create some answers today, and the defense looked pretty good in a lot of spots. And like I said, gave the team a chance. But in the end, they are not a full team. Like, you don't watch their games right now as last year's team, this year's team. You don't watch the Giants and say, I can see them on the precipice of getting their opponent on their schedule of how they want to play and dictate the game, So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, I think that the personnel has undercut the Giants consistently under this regime. I think Joe Schoen has more misses than he has hits by far. I also think that there are situations and players that, there are games and situations where if the Giants had a better coaching staff, they could take advantage of it a little better. But as somebody just pointed out, like on one, you got Theo Johnson dropping passes. You got Jermaine Illuminor lined up, and creating a penalty and backing the offense up, lined up incorrectly. You have a running game that averaged 2 yards per carry for the 3 running backs. That was in a rotation and committee. It's also a lot of this team right now is being run by committee. You got Banks popping in every now and then, even though Flott's the starter. You got 3 running backs sharing the time. You got, a report before the game that Jaxson Dart has a package, even though he's not the starter and doesn't end up playing in the game, and isn't made available for interviews. And there's conversations in the locker room about whether he should be. And, it's just total mess. I think though, my sense, my belief is that the Giants think, and Shane is telling, like Shane's argument is certainly that with a better coaching staff, they can take more advantage of this roster. But I think the general manager is as guilty as anybody. Because think about it this way. It's like a couple of years ago, Wink Martindale was the problem, right? According to the Giants, and then last year, Daniel Jones was the problem. So now if you were to say that the coach is the problem this year, it would be, okay, so the DC was the problem, the quarterback was the problem, the coach was the problem. It's like, whoa. We're running out of scapegoats here, right? So that's what I would say about the accountability for where this lies. A2 says Wilson was running for his life most of the game. Our O-line has really improved, eh? Yeah, exactly. Wilson spent a lot of time on the ground today. I thought there were a lot of plays today. This is one thing that I thought was worrisome about Wilson. I thought there were a lot of plays today where Wilson didn't belong on the ground, but ended up there anyway. Like I thought he was kind of running it for his life to the point where he was, so conscious of trying to avoid hits that he was kind of starting to duck, dodge, hide on pass rushes that either were there or were on the way, but weren't there yet. Like, you remember that whole, like, Daniel Jones is shell shock type thing? Like, I saw some of that from Russell Wilson today. Like I said, when Eli Manning was at the end, like, this is part of how it looked, like watching Russell Wilson today. It's the hesitance. It's the, he's more mobile, obviously, than Eli Manning ever was, but he's not as mobile as he used to be. He stands in the pocket, stuttering, pumping, holding the ball too long. He looked overwhelmed. He looked like he didn't have answers. Yeah. Johnny checks in with $10. Thank you so much, Johnny. He says, I think our problem is much worse. We have an ownership problem. Tisch should have fired the Shane Daboll tandem after last season. Instead, he was too busy trying to sell part of the team. Yeah, Mara has been quiet, hasn't spoken since the end of last season, didn't speak at the owners' meetings, broke precedent there. You're absolutely right, Johnny. It goes all the way to the top. You're absolutely right. And the thing is, we banged that drum for so long, and then I think a lot of fans, including yourself, obviously, eventually recognized, or you guys agreed, and it was validated that ownership was a major issue. And the problem is, you get to a certain point in that conversation, and then it's like, well, what's going to change there, though? You can chant sell the team and things like that, but the Maras aren't going anywhere. The Tisches aren't going anywhere. They're getting an infusion of cash with selling 10%. And these are people who obviously aren't going to have a seat at the table decision wise, even though they're buying into that 10% of the Giants. So, because of that, it kind of, you go round and round. It's like ownership being the problem, but then also they have to be a part of the solution. And so where do you go from there? I would say I agree with you, though, Johnny, which is like here's the number one thing that you need from ownership. You need them to know what leadership looks like when they're making hirings, right? Like hiring Joe Schoen and enabling Joe Schoen and empowering Joe Schoen and standing by Joe Shane with all of what's happened. That makes you party to it too. You can't point your finger at Joe Shane as Giants ownership right now after all that's happened and what you've stuck through, and like 2 years from now blame him as Giants ownership and say that you weren't involved in that, because they have enabled it as much as anybody. And I know John Mara is trying to be more patient than he was with other head coaches, right? He was, of course, more patient with Dave Gettleman, his guy, who helped ruin the franchise for years. But, you're party to this. Like, Joe Shane's failures are ownership failures. And I think it's good for you to bring that up, Johnny, because that is absolutely the case. Yep, Groundhog Day, no doubt about it. Let's see. Jonathan says, told you the Commanders were going to whip on them Giants. Yeah, Jonathan, the Commanders actually were really sloppy today, though, right? Drop passes, penalties, and they still didn't have a very difficult time winning the game. Of course, like I said, the Giants offense is the reason why. But Jonathan, I said this earlier. I don't know if you were here, but like if Debo catches another pass or two, if they don't drop some of those, they must have 4 or 5 like big completion drops. If they catch 3 of their 5 drops, let's say even 2 of them, and they commit 6 penalties instead of 12, this game could have been 40-6. I mean, it could have been much worse. Josh Soul says, hooks, rubs, and spices, barbecue seasoning, hopefully seasoned with some of that H-Town rub. Yeah, exactly. H-Town rub, delicious. Go to hooksrub.com. GCN says, Pat, the defense was terrible. Washington, 220 yards rushing. Burns, Thibodeau, and Carter were invisible for most of the game. Carter did block the punt. I didn't think the defense was terrible. I thought I don't think they were really good, but I think they were good. Listen, Washington scored 21 points in this game. Like, the Giants defense was good enough to win an NFL game in this game. They were not great. Brian Burns said it himself, like, no, this is not good enough. Holding a team to, 21 points is not good enough. That's not holding somebody. Like, that's too much for us to give up. We got to address that. We got to nip that in the bud. We got to make sure everybody understands that, all that kind of thing. But in the modern NFL, you should be able to win a game where you give up 21 points. You know what I mean? Like, let me look around the league. I mean, the Chargers beat the Chiefs 27-21. So the losing team with 21 points. Dallas had 20 points. Philadelphia wins 24-20. We have, let's see, 34-32. The Steelers beat the Jets. What a wild one that was. Usually you should be able to, if a team gives up 21 points, you should still be able to win that game, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers 23, Atlanta 20. So yes, you want to see more. I'm not making excuses for the bad or the things that need to be cleaned up on the defensive end. I'm just saying I'm fighting against the perception and the belief, GCN. Like, anybody who thought this defense was going to dominate to the point where the Giants are going to be able to win games like 13-10 every week, that, largely that is not the modern NFL. And also, like I said earlier, if Dex gets fully healthy or in full football shape, if Carter keeps showing this kind of promise, starts playing more snaps, and if the coverage can tighten up a little bit on the back end, maybe you do start to see the kind of defense that you need for this team, given what the offense looks like. But I do think the defense at least had them in a position, was holding this game in a position where they had a chance to come back into it if they scored points. Now, if Washington had scored at the end of the first half, that might have been a different story, right? Goes to 21-3 at halftime. If Washington comes back out and scores after forcing the Giants punt early in the third quarter, it turns into a crazy blowout. It didn't, though, right? They got into the red zone. Carter makes that play, and he tackles Jaden Daniels there on that run. It was a really nice tackle. Say it prevents a first down, prevents a touchdown, and then Jaden Daniels throws the ball away for that intentional grounding. They have the 10-second runoff, and they end up escaping without giving up any points there. Like, that's a win for the defense. That's a win for Carter, and we should bring up with Abdul Carter. So here was his day. Abdul Carter led the Giants with 3 quarterback pressures. He drew a hold against Laramie Tunsil on the play where he also recorded a half sack. So his first half sack in the NFL of Jaden Daniels, along with Kayvon Thibodeau. He had 3 tackles, played in 35 snaps. So that's per NFL Next Gen stats. So 35 snaps was 53.8% of the defense's snaps. Made his mark, obviously. I mentioned what his top play was. He also, of course, deflected that Tressway punt. Could have gotten more of it, but did arguably possibly prevent Way from pinning the Giants deep in their own end. Ball ended up on the 29-yard line. Joey B thinks that they'll fire Daboll and put Kafka in if they start 0-4. John says the Giants have to play zone. Their corners aren't good man-to-man. That would be okay if they got pressure, but Bowen is clueless. I mean, they're supposed to have the talent up front to get there anyway, right? So, I mean, here's the thing. If we're going to start blaming Shane Bowen for what's wrong with this defense, I mean, come on, guys. Or what's wrong with this team? I mean, come on. Like, remember how he ended up getting hired as like the 4th choice after Martindale resigned because he couldn't work with Daboll anymore. But, John, in fairness to your point, compare Martindale to Bowen. First of all, not the same coach in any way, right? They have different schemes, and Martindale has a different track record, obviously, with his top defenses, back in Baltimore and all of that, and his tenure in the league. Bowen pressures differently. It's a different defensive scheme. This is supposed to be like, you got to think more like Saleh in San Francisco. Like the better the front, the better the 4-man pass rush, the better everything else looks, right? It's not the same scheme. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of the idea behind it, right? It's like if we can get pressure with our 4, everything else looks a lot better. Listen, if they do play zone, in part because of the man corner stuff, but also because that is Bowen's scheme. Now, the corners didn't do a very good job in a lot of zone either today, so neither one looked good enough. But yeah, I think any conversation with the Giants starts and finishes with the offense, though. I still do. James says the main reason I came on here is to say Daboll and Shane and Kafka and Bowen need to be fired ASAP. They can't coach at the NFL level. Mara needs to make the move tonight or by week 4. Joe says more big name free agents and high draft picks that will get buried. Guard play was awful. Mark says beat inside way too much. Van Roten was a weak link last year, and he'll be a weak link this year. Barry says not all coordinators are head coaches. Theo, Neighbors, and Robinson all had multiple drops, says Christy. Entire regime needs to go. Wake up, says Murphy. Wyatt, this is a really good description. Wyatt says Wilson had a deer in the headlights look. He has an invisible O-line. He really did look. He did. That's exactly what he looked like. H-Town thinks that Neighbors is after Daboll because he knows Daboll doesn't know his stuff. Malik will want out if this continues, says Barry. We talked about the O-line. Reminder, we're brought to you by MyBookie, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, and Salad for Men, Midland Park, New Jersey, luxury menswear and tailoring. They get me ready for all my fits and my arrivals at these Giants home and away games. So thank you for tuning in and supporting our sponsors. You see the codes on the bottom. It's mybookie.ag for all your sports book and casino needs. It's Hooks, Rubs, and Spices for great product and swag. It is Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. Boomchaga.com, Talking Ball 25 to start feeling the difference. And Salaretta for Men, go to Midland Park, the store in Salaretta in Midland Park, New Jersey, Bergen County. Tell them that Pat Leonard sent you. Also, guys, be aware that I will be dropping some special codes for you soon. We have the merch store open now as well. The Talking Ball with Pat Leonard merch store. You can access that through YouTube on Shopify. We've got hoodies, T-shirts, a baseball hat, a winter hat. We got a great pint glass, too. The pint glass is my favorite. But all the Talking Ball swag is there for you. And when you tune in to Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard, we're going to start dropping some discount codes. So when you're here, when you're a subscriber, and when you're here in the chat, and while we are live, we will run specials with codes to give you guys discounts on that merch. I know Joey B and a bunch of other people were staying on top of me to get it rolling and get the merch up. So That is up and rolling. So you'll see the link on my YouTube channel. Reminder for everybody who is new or maybe returning after a hiatus, or maybe you're only checking in during the regular season. But I am the New York Daily News' NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. This is my 10th year covering the NFL and the Giants, and obviously seen a lot of bad football and some flashes of good, and looking forward to turn it around. But I'm here to chronicle all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the positive, the hope, the frustration, all of it in between, to bring you news, nuggets, information, analysis, injury updates, whatever it is you're looking for on Talking Ball with Pat Leonard. So we have guest podcasts every week. We have Talking Ball Live, which is Mondays and Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Unless something with the NFL schedule changes it. Otherwise, I keep you guys updated always on these. And then we also go live on every Giants game, post-game from the stadium. So we try to go live about 90 minutes after every game. I think today was more like 2 hours after the game ended. Was a lot to digest. Had to do an extra story on Abdul Carter for the Daily News. But generally, I think whether it's somebody going home from the stadium, or whether you're at home and, with the family, or you're getting dinner on the table, and then you're kind of coming back and you want to process what you just saw, you can join us live, which is great. I hope you do. If not, it always lives on the YouTube channel, and you can double back and check us out, whenever you want, and check in. So it'll live on the YouTube channel. You can always check us out there. All right. I have to run in a few minutes and catch my train back to New Jersey, but let's go through and see some highlights. If you have a question that I didn't answer that you really want answered, I'm not forcing you to pay money in, but I'm just saying I have to go soon. And so purchase a super chat or a super sticker. Anybody who purchase one in the next few minutes, I will answer those, and then we will get out of here. I'll answer a couple others in the queue right now as I go, and then any super chats that are left, and then we will get rolling. Thank you so much. Ben says, Pat, you said the Colts would start 6-2 just a couple weeks ago. Impressive prediction if that comes true. Yeah, it was partly related to their schedule. And it was partly related to their schedule. And it was partly due to the fact that Steichen and Daniel Jones together, I thought, would be a fit. They do have talent on their offense too, and I also believe Lou Anarumo is a pretty good coordinator who's new on their defense. Barry says, I think he's talking about one of the sponsors. You say it doesn't take the promo code for some reason. Why is that? If you're talking about Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, you have to go to the subscribe and save option, Barry. It's just their way of tracking it, but you don't have to stay subscribed. If you just buy the bag as a sign and subscribe, it'll take the discount with the code, and then you can just cancel the subscription for free. It doesn't lock you in or anything. It doesn't penalize you for jumping out of the subscription. So for Boom Chaga, that's what you need to do. All right, we got a couple super chats in the queue. Thank you so much to everybody for purchasing them and for supporting us and for being here. Let's see. You guys are lighting up the chat. I love it. Yes, good reminder, hit the like button while we are live here too. If you like the content that we are bringing here, guys, and our numbers are obviously great right now. Thank you so much for being here. But, if you hit the like button, give us a positive review while we are live in the comments under the YouTube video, and hit that like button, those thumbs up. That's a great way to tell the YouTube algorithm that this is something that is live and cooking and popular, and that you want to see more of, and that you want other Giants fans to see more of. Here on YouTube, on the channel. You can listen on audio as well, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. You can check that out. All right, let's see. H-Town says, hit that like button if you want Daboll fired. That's a good way of doing it. Kevin checks in with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate that. Candyman, what's up, Candyman? Candyman, I love it. Candyman's an OG here at Talking Ball and with the Giants in general. He says, Pat, why did we use the Andrew Thomas contract to create cap space? He can't stay on the field. Candyman, I still don't know the answer to that. I need to get an answer to that. I do not know. I don't know. It's I would be speculating if I answered that, but that's something I and other reporters are trying to figure out right now, because it doesn't seem like a player that you want to kick cap cost down the road for. It seemed like you want to roll it all up now, anticipating that he might not be available for you or even on the team. Lane says, I look fit. I appreciate that, Lane. It's the shirt. Let's see. All right, we're going to close on these questions right here. Christopher says, Pat, when should we expect that Dart will play? I think he has to play in Dallas at this rate. I think Daboll saying, hey, we're right after the game. Like he didn't say, Pat, Russ is our starter. Why are you asking me that? He said, come on, we're right after the game. And then he's like, I'm confident in Russ. This wasn't on him. This wasn't on him. What his answer told me after the game today, if I were guessing, if I were a betting man, I would say Russell Wilson is still starting the Dallas game, but that we will actually see Jaxson Dart in that game, most likely, at some point. Like, assuming if things don't go right? If Russell Wilson starts the Dallas game and the offense is cooking against the Cowboys, then you'll see Russell Wilson playing. But I'm saying if Russell Wilson starts that game and then he is if Russell Wilson starts that game and then he is not cooking and he is struggling the way he did in this game, then I think you would see Dart in that case. I've said all along I thought Dart would get in during the Chiefs game and end up starting the Chargers game. That was my prediction. Mike says, what about Winston? Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I feel like Winston wasn't active as the number 2 today. If they wanted to play Winston before Dart, then they would have had Winston active as the number 2, right? And Dart inactive and as the emergency 3, you would think. D-Rock thinks Dart will get killed if he's in. Alex says, great job, Pat, and thanks for the honesty. You got it, Alex. Thank you. Let's see. We talked about Darius Alexander. Just had an underwhelming camp. Yeah, it reflects on your rushing, and they gave up too many rushing yards, 220 rushing yards. 68 of that was to Daniels, but obviously still not good enough. I do think at the end, too, the Commanders were able to pad that with the defense kind of, worn down because the offense just couldn't get on the board. Does Mara have a history of ever firing coaches mid-season? That's generally not something that they do, but they did it with Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese when they benched Eli Manning. That was mid-season. Steve says, great job as usual, Pat. Thanks for the insight. Chris says, Dart was a job saver. You're nuts if you think he's anything more. Guys, this has been a great chat. I'm sorry we couldn't be more positive about it. Oh, we got one more super chat in here. Hunter says, Malik, let's see. Malik's answer to the back question that I asked, where he says, I'm not going to talk about that, shows lack of maturity, a lot of antics on the sideline, moped from the first to the last. He is only, I believe, 22 years old, so that's been a common theme there too. Typical of a young guy, but obviously you hope that changes. Guys, this has been awesome. It's mybookie.ag. You see the code at the bottom, Leonard. It's Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, Talking Ball. It's boomchaga.com, Talking Ball 25, and it's Sal Loretta for men. We're going to do our next Giants trivia question on Monday. Got to wrap, got to roll, got to get to the train. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much for being here at Talking Ball with Pat Leonard. Hopefully we see more from this team next time. Patrick reminds us that he's tired of talking and hearing about the O-line. The next year's first 4 picks should be O-line picks. Patrick, thanks for saying that, and thanks for the $20 super chat right here at the end. I really appreciate that. And it's interesting. We actually had a conversation here on Talking Ball recently where somebody asked me a really good question. They said, Pat, if you were to fast forward 2, 3, 4 years down the road here, what would be the next part of the roster that you would want to make sure you address? This was before this game, right? And without even hesitating, I said the offensive line, just as far as what they were investing in, with the draft and trying to bring in young talent and developing and improving. That is, that would be my answer there, Patrick, is I think that is a position that is overdue to receive an infusion of talent, a young infusion of talent. And as Lane points out, though, this is what I was just getting to. Lane, you're finishing my sentences. You're on it. He says, but no one has picked more O linemen than us, and they pick busts, right? So they've picked linemen. They've just missed. end on this. Lane says, last question. Does Mara have a history? Oh, he says, if we go 0-6, why wouldn't we fire Daboll? Yeah, no, I mean, listen, they were on the verge of firing him early last year if they couldn't get a win early. I think Dart maybe changes things for how they proceed this year. But listen, the leash is short. At this point, nothing, the Giants showed after a 3-14 year by keeping these guys that their standard is just non-existent at this point. What is their standard? We don't know. Great point. Yep. 22 team had Jones, Barkley, and Thomas healthy for all 17 or on the field for all 17 game and playoffs. That's right. Guys, thank you so much. Hunter says, have a good one. James says, peace. Thank you, guys. They all say thank you. Joey B, Mark Sullivan, Hooks, Scott, PM, Joey B, Daniel Hirsch, Scorpio, Into, Johnny, Kevin, Hunter, Candyman, Patrick. Guys, thank you so much for all of these super chats. I really do appreciate you guys. Please support our sponsors. Please go to the Talking Ball merch store. I'll see you back here. Let's see. Tomorrow, Monday. Tomorrow, Monday's up in the air. I'm going to Leonard Marshall's charity golf event. It's possible we do a live tomorrow. I'll keep you guys updated. Follow me on Twitter or XPLeonardNYDN and on Instagram at PL on NFL, same handle as YouTube, for updates on whether we're going to go live tomorrow night. I'm planning on it, but that's an all-day event, so we'll see if I'm back in time for 9 p.m. If I am, you'll see the teas all over my social media. If not, we'll still go live later in the week. But, make sure you're following me on YouTube, on Instagram, and everywhere, because I'll post updates. I'll post quick news updates. Sometimes I do impromptu lives on YouTube, kind of as like a YouTube short live type thing. So stay tuned. Stay with me. Love this community. Love you guys. Thank you so much. See ya.